In this video, we're going to continue on with the create table statement. If you remember in the last video, I showed you the language syntax. I have it pasted over here in another tab, and how confusing it is because there's so many options. Well, let's talk for a second just about the options that we're going to play with. So if I were to clean this up only to the options that are relevant to us, I'm going to get rid of that word. So temporary, and we'll have create table. If not exists, I use that occasionally. And later in the course, we may talk about this one. That's creating a table that's like another table. So it'll grab all the definitions. But for now, we're not really going to mess with that. Column name, column definition. The rest of this, nope. We're going to put in a name. And then in terms of the data or column definition, we're going to put in a data type. And in this video, or well, in the next video, we're going to talk about not null or null. We're going to talk about default. We'll talk about auto increment. The word unique, key is optional. We've already messed with the primary key. Notice you could just put the word primary, or I guess it's probably put the word key. We won't be dealing with either of these or the reference definition. In terms of data types, right, this is just a big long list of all the various data types. So we've played with that already a little bit. And then finally the rest of this we will get rid of, and later in the quarter we'll talk about foreign keys and how they'll reference another table. And finally, that's about it. I will talk about this engine, maybe this auto increment. We've already mentioned character sets. So for the most part, the rest of this big, long syntax we can get rid of. And that's all we are going to mess with. So in review, it's just going to be create table. If not exists, you give it a name. We define the name of a column, its data type, and then in these videos we're going to start playing with some of these settings we can put on each of the columns. So let's get started. We'll talk about auto increment. So I'll run over here. Remember, I had a database, my company, and I created this employee table, and these are the columns that we'd already messed with: employee ID, first name, last name, email, salary, hire date, phone, and social security number. Now, in the previous video, we added a primary key, and what that does is when we put in these numbers, we got to make sure, or the system will make sure that I will never let me put in a duplicate number. So now let's go down and talk about auto increment. What auto increment does is it will, and it's very often used with primary keys, it will assign a sequence of numbers. So as I insert data, I don't have to remember, oh, what number am I on, and put in the next number for that primary key. It will assign a value to it. And so here's how you put it in. We basically, I'll zoom in here, we basically add the word auto increment right there. So I have employee ID. It's an integer data type. I've said it's a primary key, and now I can add the word auto increment. There's no comma. You just put space auto underscore increment, and then of course you put the comma at the end of the column definition. I'll mention right now I've had some students that'll put like employee ID, and they'll make the data type some text or character data type like char or varchar. Well, of course, auto increment doesn't work with that because it's trying to assign a sequence of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so your data type has to be an integer data type. And as long as we're talking about it, remember if you were to use something called a tiny int, the largest number is 127. Well, be careful. If you add more than 127, auto increment's going to try to keep going, and you'll get an error at some point as it tries to go beyond the size of your data type. So let's create this table, and we'll insert a couple, we'll do some experimenting down here. And notice I have this set up such that I can keep running, recreating my table, inserting people, selecting, and it's a way, that's how I learn SQL, by playing, right? You set yourself up so you can try some experiments. Something I haven't mentioned in previous videos, sometimes you go to create a table or do a select statement or whatever the command may be, and when you run it, you'll get this. no database selected. It's like, oh, well, thankfully it's a pretty clear message, and then nothing has been selected, so it doesn't know where to create the table. So one way to select it, obviously, in this GUI environment is just to double click on my company and select it, or there's a use command. So watch when I run this use command, all of a sudden my company gets selected. All right. Now, in this case, I'm going to drop table, and notice I've added some words here called if exists. So right here, you can say, well, drop it if it exists, otherwise don't, and that way I don't get an error message and my script will keep running. All right, so now I can just select quite literally all of these lines. I'll drop it if it's there, recreate it if it doesn't exist, and I'm creating my auto increment. So here we go. So I'm using my company, I dropped the table, and I've recreated it with auto increment. So now, remember there's two ways to insert data into a table. One is you insert into the name of the table and you don't list the columns, but then of course I have to fill in every column, a value for every column. The other way is you insert into and you list the columns. So in this case, 2 of them, last name and salary. And then I only have to put in values for those 2 columns. So here's the tricky part. I'll zoom in again, and that is, remember, employee ID is the first column. Well, I don't want to type in the number 1, 2, 3, 4 because I don't know what is the next number in this sequence. And so the word you use is default. All right, so that's going to be the employee ID. I'm just going to say, oh, whatever, I got an auto increment, just let it choose that value. Okay, so let's get out of here. Let's run that. So when I say default, I'll go ahead and run it. And now we'll select from our employees. And there you go. It shows number 1, which makes sense. It's a brand new table, right? But it's stuck in the 1. Now, what happens here? Insert into employee, last name, salary, and I'm putting in a name and a salary. I'm not even mentioning the employee ID, right? So when I hit run, I get my green check. And now when I say select from, it puts in a 2, right? It will just continue to run through the employees. Now, if at some point you were to delete an employee, it doesn't regenerate that number the next time you insert an employee. So let me show you that. Now, we haven't used this delete command before, but just to demonstrate, I'm going to go ahead and delete employee 2. So now when I select, notice John is still here at number 1. I will reinsert Casey, and we'll do a select, and Casey will still be 3, right? So auto increment just keeps going. And that's okay, because remember, the whole point of a primary key is I need a unique number. I don't care what the number is, it just has to it can't be a duplicate number, it has to be unique for every row. So that's it for auto increment. Just remember, if you don't list the columns in your insert into statement, you have to use this default keyword to tell auto increment to just use your next number. If you do list the columns, but you don't happen to list that 1, then you don't have to say anything and auto increment will just work. If you happen to say, oops, I want to put the employee ID in here, which would kind of be unnecessary, right? It's auto increment. But if you did, well then again, you'd have to put that default keyword. And now that's going to grab the next number. So in this case, it'll be number 4.